Well, a very good evening to you all at home. It is 2100 hours Central African time and you are watching Economics Unbound. And I'm Thandeka Kubulembeki. This week, South Africans have found themselves in the dark as Eskom implemented load shedding. This has left some people and businesses stranded. Some Gautrain passengers were left stranded last week, Friday, as trains were not operating between Midrand, Park Station, Sandton and OR Tambo International Airport due to power outages. Now, scores of frustrated commuters took to social media blaming both the Gautrain and state electricity utility Eskom for their failure to get to work and school on time, while others said they had missed their flights completely.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Nana. Yes, Tans, we look into how this has affected South Africans and the damage it has caused some businesses.
Yes, the current load shedding will likely push the economy into a recession, with companies unable to operate at full capacity. This according to Center for Risk Analysis Chief Economist Ian Cruikshank. He says Eskom is a huge risk to the economy and it is being unable to provide affordable and stable electricity will lead to serious economic misfortune for this country. Now, the country also risks being downgraded to junk status as it seems not to be able to be getting a grip on concerns previously raised by ratings agencies like weak growth, bailouts for state-owned enterprises, and growing and ballooning government debt.
In addition to the low growth, Eskom has been identified as the country's biggest economic risk. Government's debt burden and liabilities related to Eskom and other state-owned entities in a country with a constrained fiscus have been highlighted as negative to the economy. To mitigate the immediate risk that Eskom poses to the economy, the utility receives assistance to service its debt obligations. Eskom has about 440 billion in debt and has been receiving government bailouts after massive cost overruns at two partially completed coal-fired plants. In this week's letter from the President's desk, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the problems with the construction of Medupi and Kusile account for much of the financial crisis at Eskom. The President says the cost of building Medupi escalated dramatically since construction started and it's behind schedule. The consequences of Eskom's inability to supply constant power and at affordable prices will lead to negative consequences for the economy.
Eskom currently is a huge risk to the economy because we depend on Eskom for 95% of all of our electrical power requirements. That's a massive amount. Now globally it's accepted that coal-fired power stations should run at an absolute minimum of 75% of capacity. Where are we? Running at 57%. So that just shows how far below the global minimum standards that should be attained are reaching. And what is that doing to us? It means that whole sectors are being put out of business.
Households and businesses are currently battling hours of power cuts. Some mining companies were forced to scale down operations due to safety concerns as a result of the load shedding. This will likely translate to an even lower economic performance for this year. Rating agencies have raised concerns of low growth and the growing government debt and contingent liabilities. South Africa is ranked at sub-investment grade by S&P, Fitch, while Moody's has the country one notch above the non-investment grade. If South Africa is downgraded, it would also be removed from the key bond indices, which would lead to even more outflows.
We're probably heading towards a recession. The third quarter was a recession, was negative, 0.6%. The fourth quarter, I think, is rushing really headlong towards another downswing. It's going to mean we could have had two consecutive quarters of a shrinking in the economy. Then we get the official view that that is a recession. Well, is that fair? If we look at Mr. Ramaphosa's time in office, since the beginning of last year, that's 7 quarters. Of those 7 quarters, 4 have been negative, have been shrinking. Surely that is a recession, and that's where we are. So we shouldn't be surprised if the last of the rating agencies says South Africa is going to be downgraded further.
While the government has proposed splitting Eskom into 3 parts to try and address its challenges, Cruikshanks says it would help if the right people are put in decision-making positions. Dura Safakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, Labour Federation COSATU says the devastating bout of load shedding could not have come at a worse time for the country as we head towards the festive season.
The negative impact of it is huge for businesses, but mainly for the ordinary South Africans, the workers in particular. Hours of work have been lost. Workers are losing wages. And you have workers that are expected to give back to their communities. It's Christmas time.
Now, mobile network operators have also warned that Eskom's continued load shedding means many broadband subscribers and smartphone users will experience downtime. While proactive measures may be in place, just how much will networks be impacted by the continued load shedding? Now, we spoke to Jackie O'Sullivan, the Executive for Corporate Affairs at MTN South Africa.
Fortunately for MTN, we've invested quite heavily in batteries. Our objective is to try and keep our customers connected as much as possible. So we spent about 300 million rand last year investing in batteries to provide the backup systems. The problem that we face is once we move past Schedule 3, we start moving into the areas where it's just not giving us enough time to reload our batteries. So we've got batteries that have a capacity for 6 to 12 hours, but we do need 12 to 18 hours to reload those batteries. So that's where the complexity starts to get into it. So we've got batteries, we have generators on a sort of, at the moment we are fortunate that we don't have that many sites down, but we are still spending about R1 million every 3 days on fuel for the generators that we've brought in. So the costs are high, but obviously our real concern is keeping people connected, because this is about safety and security as much as it's about be able to get in touch with friends and family.
This story is kind of, sits kind of close to me, because I had, I wouldn't call it downtime, but connectivity issues yesterday as well when we hit stage 6 load shedding. How much of that then do you have to financially prepare for, and how much can you prepare for in a time like this? Are you constantly in communication perhaps with Eskom? Are you finding new ways to try and innovate your technology and get around it?
Absolutely. So we've actually we've reactivated our war rooms that we have in all the regions that we have around the country, because obviously MTN's got a massive footprint. We cover the whole country with 2G. We've got 3G at least. We have 95% coverage in the country of 4G. So there's a lot of people relying on good connectivity. So our war rooms are keeping a constant contact with Eskom, and then we're actually being able to see how we can mitigate, where we can spread the traffic, where we can move traffic so that we take it to where there currently is capacity. The added financial burden that all the networks have been seeing is that the batteries that are used have become a massive source of income for various syndicates. So on top of the purchasing of the batteries, we've had to now invest in security, and really quite detailed types of security, tracking devices that can't be found, tracking devices that are only activated later down the line to try and avoid them being detected. So it's a complicated process that has been
Does this all happen despite load shedding, or is it only when load shedding comes into effect?
So it happens all the time. So we're constantly fighting the scourge of, we realize it's not random acts, it is syndicates that are operating. However, we do find it's actually worsened during load shedding, because obviously their neighborhoods are in the dark. So we are really trying very hard to work with police and to work with local community organizations to try and keep the awareness out there that we need to kind of keep an eye on these base stations, because they're keeping communities connected, and in many instances they're connecting communities to their safety, alarm systems, schools, that sort of thing. So it really is a priority.
Any sort of help, advice, thoughts, something that could help consumers in a time like this when it comes to connectivity? Are there any sort of quick fixes for them in a time where perhaps electricity is gone for around 4.5 hours?
So I think the key thing that we always advise people is, quite often people don't understand what's happening on their devices. So particularly when people have smartphones, they often don't realize what's running in the background, and that causes their phones to run down. So we really encourage people, even if it means popping by your provider's store and just saying, what exactly is going on here? how can I check? Because even if I've closed all my apps, maybe there's something else still happening in the background. And I think that's a critical thing. People need to understand where their data is being used, not only to conserve battery power, but they shouldn't be using data if they're not actively using it. There shouldn't be things happening in the background because that is costing those customers money. So really understanding your device, and then making sure that you really understand what your own schedule is going to look like, so that you can have those backup facilities in place. We've also seen great success with the use of solar power technologies. So we've been really encouraging the schools that we invest in through the foundation, the MTN Foundation, to put in those backup facilities, so at least in the case of severe load shedding, that their safety and security is maintained.
Now that's an example of a big business affected, but small businesses were also hard hit by the current load shedding. For more on this, we spoke to Christian Steyn. He is the head of business insurance at MyWay.
I think businesses really, and that would be my first advice, is to really go through your policy and understand what you are covered for. What load shedding could mean for your business, and whether that is covered by your insurance policy.
How do you know for sure if what you're going through is entirely covered? Is this something you should be discussing beforehand? Is this something you should have precautionary measures for anyway beforehand, in order to kind of make sure that you're in line with your policy?
I think, the insurance at the end of the day is trying to provide cover for unforeseen and sudden events, for things that's out of your control and that you can't plan for. Where we are now, it's kind of a fact now. We're in load shedding season and it's going to happen. So at this point, it's not unforeseen anymore. And I think the advice and the role that we can play is to advise clients and to help them to mitigate that risk, and to stay in business and keep their doors open.
How often do you get a case, or a case that is impacted by load shedding then as yourselves? I mean, how many cases, if you mind giving us an estimate perhaps? And with regards to payouts as well, that might be quite an interesting saga. How much are you putting out sort of with that as well?
So with the fact that we haven't had load shedding for months now, it hasn't really been something top of mind.
Years though.
Yes. So the last time was kind of early this year. The typical claims that come with load shedding is power surge claims, when the power comes back on and electronic equipment that just can't handle that. So in that sense, our advice would definitely be to invest in surge protection type of equipment to make sure that you protect the stuff that's critical to you running your business. Other types of claims would be a business interruption claim, where you suffer a loss of income as a result of load shedding. So, but those are, firstly, like I said, it has to be unforeseen. So something like Friday morning when we all woke up and the lights are off, that would be an unforeseen event. Last night, if you were, for example, running a restaurant business, you expected to have electricity last night, and all of a sudden, you don't. You could
have been having dinner.
That would have been unforeseen. So those are big ones. Deterioration of stock, for example. Previously, that was never really a big issue, because within a 4-hour window, if you don't have power, food wouldn't normally spoil in such a short time. If stage 6, 7, 8 suddenly becomes a reality, that might, we might see a lot more of those claims.
Christian, what else then? I mean, so what is it that you'd give as the best sort of advice then for these small businesses? Because as you said, it's not new anymore. It's not a surprise anymore. This is something you have to plan for. What are the thoughts when taking out those policies with yourselves, or anybody else for that matter? What is it that they need to specifically ask for?
So power surge and dips cover, I think, is important. That's kind of the term used in the industry. Business interruption cover, and then also specifically making sure what is covered by your business interruption policy. A standard business interruption policy is not going to cover load shedding. With MyWay, we have it as an extension, as an extended cover that you can buy at an additional premium that covers interruptions to kind of public services, water, power, gas, that type of thing. So I think it's important to understand and ask those questions. In general, I think just wider than just the insurance industry, our advice would be just to be prepared. Be as prepared as you possibly can, and with that, I don't just mean understand when your schedule is or when your suburb is up for its interruption, but also understand the schedules from your suppliers and your clients. If you're expecting a delivery because someone else is depending on that, or your clients are expecting you to deliver, it's also important to understand whether those deliveries will be able to take place.
Oh boy.
Understanding, what's the impact if you're renting somewhere. Speak to your landlord, understand what's the security impact, potential security impact of not having power.
Now, welcome back. Have you ever wondered what kind of problem exactly plagues Eskom? Is it a leadership problem? Is it a technical problem? Or is it a financial problem? Now, President Ramaphosa says sabotage was partly to blame for the power outages that led to load shedding. The president was speaking at Eskom's Megawatt Park north of Johannesburg yesterday. President Ramaphosa met with cabinet ministers and the Eskom board on what led to load shedding. Among issues listed is the actual age of the power stations, with many of them being in their 50s, and rainfall was also blamed. President Ramaphosa says the country needs an emergency recovery plan to make sure to get rid of load shedding. But I thought that is what Kusile and Medupi were supposed to do. Ironically, they have been fingered as part of the problem. Now, the president says that Eskom will work to restore the network to good stability by the end of March. The cuts which have disrupted this electricity supply to businesses and households across South Africa dealt a further blow to an economy already teetering on the brink of a recession.
There has been a measure of sabotage that has led to the loss of, during this period, of 2,000 megawatts, where someone in the Eskom system disconnected one of the instruments that finally led to one of the boilers tripping and us losing as much as 2,000, I think it was 2 boilers. Now, another problem that we have had is cable theft. Much as it did not really lead to the load shedding that we've had, but it has had the effect also where people have stolen cable, and some of them have even declined or collapsed rather pylons that have caused problems to the system. Now, our own assessment of all these explanations that we were given, we felt that management, in the course of this recent load shedding, yes, did do their best to respond and to restore the system to being somewhat stable, and we think that they've acted correctly. But at the same time, we had a sense that they have not acted with the urgency that is required. They need to be much more agile, and they need to underpin what they do with greater urgency and be able to anticipate some of these breakages that happen. And of course, one of the things that we observed is that the maintenance process of our fleet is rather slow, and it is not as deep as it should be, because maintenance is one of the key problems that faces us, particularly in view of the fact that we are dealing with an aged fleet. We therefore need to be more proactive when it comes to the maintenance of the system. We also felt that there needed to be more accountability at the management level. More accountability is required so that there should not be blame shifting. People need to own up when they have not done what is necessary, what they needed to do. So we want management to be much more proactive. And we then discussed a number of solutions that will give rise to how we restore the stability of the system. We felt that we need to have an emergency recovery plan, that is going to make sure that we get rid of load shedding, and management has given us an assurance that they are trying to stabilize the system and get more and more of the megawatts that we have lost to be restored. And they have given us the assurance that from the 17th of December right through to the 13th of January, we should not be in a position to have any form of load shedding. And going right through to March, they will be seeking to do everything they can to restore the stability of the network. And I have instructed all managers and executives that all leave is cancelled. No one goes on leave. If we are to have the system restored to stability, all leave from now on until January is cancelled. All executives must remain in place, and all key managers must remain in place to make sure that we do not have load shedding. We must also investigate the sabotage. I've directed that the sabotage acts must be investigated, and they must immediately work with the South African Police Service and our intelligence service as well to find out exactly how anyone within Eskom could have disconnected the instrument that has led to the loss of 2,000 megawatts.
Now, after the President addressed the nation and the press, Eskom itself elaborated on the acts of sabotage.
Apologies for what has happened this week. Just to touch on the incident that we have had in one of our power stations in terms of tampering with some of the protections on the boiler. We have established, we've got the instrument around the boiler that monitors the flame in the boiler too. So that when you lose the boiler, it takes out the protection, should trip the boiler as a part of the protection against explosion, so that you don't introduce the coal when there's no fire on the boiler. So what we've picked up after we've lost 2 machines at the power station is that there was some tampering, because we found that because these monitors are cleaned continuously by the air, so that air that is fed to these flame scanners was then disturbed, and then the boiler did not see the flame or the protection, then it trips the boilers when the flame is not detected. It's part of the protection of the boiler as well, that when the flame is not visible, it must take it out automatically from the system.
Now, the National Union of Metal Workers has weighed in on the load shedding issue and the challenges facing South Africa. NUMSA blames the problem less on sabotage and more on the failures of leadership at Eskom.
We must say as NUMSA we are quite surprised to hear these allegations of sabotage, which are being used as the basis of an excuse for the shocking levels of blackouts which have rolled out across the country. As NUMSA, we've been on record consistently to say from the beginning, the moment that load shedding began, and even this bout of load shedding, is as a result of the failure of leadership at Eskom. There has been a complete failure to deal with maintenance since 2012. And this was actually even confirmed yesterday in news reports by the former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mondli Gungubele, who in his time was actually part of Parliament's committee looking into SOEs. He was very clear that the failure of Eskom and the extremely bad load shedding that is experienced at the moment is as a direct result of the failure of this ANC government to run this SOE properly. His words were that there were people who deliberately refused to intervene on the issue of maintenance at Eskom. Now, if that's not sabotage, I don't know what is. And for us as NUMSA, we continue to be shocked that this ANC government can concoct excuses when it's very clear where the problem lies. They are refusing to deal with the actual cause of the problem. They've not gotten rid of this board that doesn't have a clue of what it's doing. They've done nothing to intervene in executive management made up of people who have no experience in generation. They've appointed task teams which have been a massive cost burden to the taxpayer. Even now, we still don't have solutions. This time last year, we were told that shoddy workmanship at Medupi was responsible for the load shedding that we experienced last year. Nothing was done about that. But so quickly, all of a sudden, you want to blame workers for a problem which existed for many, many years, and where both the board, government as a shareholder, and executive management have done absolutely nothing to intervene to ensure we keep the lights on at Eskom.
So, I mean, these leadership issues are perhaps on the table for sure, but is it not possible that alongside that there could be some elements of sabotage? The President talks specifically about people failing to connect specific switches at boilers.
All we're saying is that if indeed there is such sabotage, then the responsible thing to do is to deal with those people. We hope that beyond an investigation, and we keep hearing for calls for an investigation, that decisive action will be taken if such a thing took place. But I think we must also make it very clear that long before this even occurred, we've had a situation at all our SOEs, but in particular at Eskom, where there have been deliberate decisions taken not to do maintenance. There have been deliberate decisions to delay, for example, building more power stations. Decisions that should have been taken before 2008 was not taken. We know, for example, of Eskom executives who benefited through the price of diesel in 2008 when load shedding took place. They made a fortune from that, but there was no disciplinary action taken against those executives. So we are surprised to hear suddenly that some invisible hand was responsible for stage 6 load shedding. It is really shocking. And I think we continue to be given excuses as a nation, but what we lack is leadership. And this is ultimately at the heart of the crisis of all SOEs. This is the reason why SAA is collapsing. This is the reason why Eskom is collapsing. The problem is with government, the shareholder, and the ANC government in particular. And as long as no decisive action is being taken against certain ministers, certain executives and board members, we will continue to lurch from crisis to crisis at Eskom.
Welcome back. Now, Eskom announced Monday night that Camden Power Station in Mpumalanga was down and completely out of action. Camden's contribution to the national grid was terminated, contributing to load shedding. SABC reporter Tumelo Machoha, our colleague, was tracking developments there.
Well, the closure of Camden come at a time when this oldest power station has been underperforming. This is one of the oldest power stations that was built here in 1967. It was commissioned then in October in 1967, and it was built here when South Africa was actually going through industrialization. So the closure of this power station is actually such a blow to the country, not only to Eskom, but it's such a blow to the country because this is one of the power stations that has been providing, generating electricity to South Africa, and also providing electricity to neighboring countries around the sub-Saharan countries. This station was also built here because they thought building it here closer to the coal mines, because Eskom is actually relying mainly on coal, and this region here in Mpumalanga is one of the regions that actually provide a lot of coals to these mines. It has about 8 units, and those 8 units, they have up to 200 to 400 megawatts. So the whole power station here, it actually generates about 1,600 megawatts here at this power station, and also it has about 400 voltage lines that goes through the sub-Saharan countries and also into South Africa, also generating to the national grid. So when we're losing this power station, it's actually such a blow because we're not only going to lose a power station that has been providing electricity throughout the country and to neighboring countries, but we're also going to be losing a lot of megawatts that have gone through the power station. You'd remember that since the rain has started about a week ago, the power station has reported that it has been flooded with rainwater because it has received up to 250 millimeters of rain since the start of the rain last week. So it has been flooded. We know that the boiler is one of the areas that has been affected. We know that the turbines halls is also one of the areas that has been affected, and also critical to this is the infrastructure actually that supplies and hold the coal inside the power station here. So that has been affected by the rain, but now still the power station has been closed and is in a closure. So far, if you look into the power station so far, there is still a plume of smoke that is still coming out of the power station, and there's still a bit of noise that is still coming out of the power station. We saw a couple of people coming in and out of the power station throughout the day as we've been here to actually monitor the situation here at this power station. But it's such a big blow, not only to Eskom, especially now that Eskom has been implementing load shedding throughout the country, but also because now since yesterday we received that call by Eskom to say that they are struggling to keep the lights on, and we're going to be moving to stage 6. So it with the loss of this power station, it's obvious that the load shedding will continue throughout this week because of what the company has lost here.
Now, many thanks to Tumelo, our colleague, who braved the cold and the rain after being denied access to Camden Power Station this week. Operations have since resumed at the Sibanye Stillwater Mine in Tennyson in the Free State, which came to a standstill earlier this week after Eskom implemented stage 6 load shedding.
Multiple reasons have been given for the rolling power blackouts. The ripple effects of these blackouts have now spilled over into the mining sector. Harmony Gold, Impala and Sibanye Stillwater say they have been forced to cut production because there's just not enough power to keep operations running. Mining bosses did not want to risk employees' lives. Last year, 955 miners were trapped underground at this mine shaft due to a massive power cut caused by heavy thunderstorms.
It started even yesterday from the night shift that all the workers, even today in the morning shift, all the workers didn't go to work. They were asked to go home due to the fact of the safety is the priority as an NUM. We are taking as a very serious issue because we don't want to lose any life.
We are very much concerned. Yesterday we received the notice from Harmony informing us that they have made a decision to cancel the night shift. Even Sibanye did the same thing To us, it was clear that now the mines, they took a right decision to prioritize the safety of our members. Even in this morning, we have been informed that the same decision has been made. The morning shift has been cancelled.
The Sibanya Stillwater and Petra Diamonds mine managers say they will continue to monitor the situation. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Tianjin.
Now, we're certainly taking you around the country to wrap up our experience as a nation of the Eskom load shedding experience this week. We also spoke to Chief Economist at the Minerals Council of South Africa, and his name is Hank Langenhoven, on the matter.
The problem with stage 6 is that we virtually only have power to run ventilation and keep the pumps going and get people out of the shafts. So that was a serious disruption, and for a day we were not certain of what's going to happen.
Is stage 4 manageable?
Stage 4 is manageable to a degree. Stage 2 is fine. Companies can actually maneuver around doing things, delaying certain processes. Stage 4 for them is a problem, and they start to have to curtail either production or smelting or that sort of thing. So it becomes uncomfortable then to keep going at the levels that we need to.
And I would imagine that it's not just a question of switching off the plugs at a mine and switching them on again. Powering up and starting once you've shut down is quite a process.
You're absolutely right. If you have one shift not going down, the next phase is for engineers to go down to try and make certain that it's safe, and then the next shift can go down. So it is greatly disruptive, and if it's longer than just the day or so, then it can disrupt a process that have ripple effects up to 3 weeks sometimes.
And with commodity prices and the margins that some of these mines are working at, days not operating or not operating to capacity will have an effect on the bottom line and perhaps even down the line on jobs.
Absolutely. That is actually the big worry, is that currently, because of the uncertainty and because of the curtailment, we cannot run at the capacities that we can. I don't know whether you know, but we have about 150 smelters in the country. 74 of them are either shut or run at below capacity.
Now, off to the Western Cape, where authorities say they are managing the effects of load shedding as best as possible. Meanwhile, major tourist attractions like Table Mountain Aerial Cableway and the V&A waterfront are doubling efforts to stay operational.
Tourism and agriculture in the province are hardest hit by load shedding. The province is calling for a meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa to discuss and find permanent solutions to the energy crisis. Premier Alan Winde says it's time for the Western Cape to reduce its reliance on coal energy.
I've said that already. We should have some decentralization process and actually some privatization moving in, and that's why I really do support the quick bringing into small embedded generation into the system, because it's much quicker to market. And obviously when you want to build big power plants, they take years and years and years to build.
One of Africa's greatest tourist attractions, the V&A waterfront, installed 40 industrial-sized generators a few years ago. The waterfront employs over 20,000 people in various capacities, including at its over 400 retailers and 80 restaurants. Millions visit the establishment annually.
We can make a plan, we can trade through. The difficulty we're experiencing just now is just the length of time the power is out. So these generators are supposed to be backups for interim. We're at load shedding level 6. You're talking something like 7 hours. Now, given most of them will probably have 3 to 4 hours of fuel, you're talking about logistics of fueling them 3 to 4 times. And this constant on-off is inevitably things break. The most recent thing we had was the heat they generated popped the sprinkler systems.
Table Mountain was closed today while a backup generator was fixed. Yesterday, a number of visitors were stuck at the top of the mountain when the power went out, and they had to be brought down in small groups.
We were very confident that this holiday season was going to be a bumper season, and thus we're very disappointed that this load shedding comes at a time where our tourism industry least needs it. This is going to impact especially local South Africans who may have wanted to travel down to Cape Town to spend the holidays here. Foreign visitors, as we know, may already have booked tickets, and so, we are just going to have to see how we manage them.
We have to go back home, so we are very disappointed about this load shedding. We were trying to do the cable car today, but unfortunately we have the load shedding problem with the cable car, so we have to rethink our plan.
The Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry says any business investor wants clarity and stability. It says this round of load shedding came as a surprise and the uncertainty has consequences.
Energy is absolutely crucial for the economy. We know of businesses that have evaluated the situation and may need to close down. And it's not a pleasant situation for them because we're breaking the cardinal rule. We're not giving business certainty.
Mariska Botha, SABC News, Cape Town.
Now, the city of Cape Town is advising residents to collect and store water as its pumping system might not cope with heightened load shedding. The city opened an additional spring for water collection. It urged residents to continue to make use of alternative water sources. This as the drought in the Western Cape continues despite increased dam levels.
The impact of load shedding is far-reaching. The city of Cape Town says, given the unpredictability that came with the recent round of load shedding, planning becomes difficult. It says residents should store water for drinking and non-potable use as a precaution. Stage 6 load shedding is uncharted territory, but the city says its pump systems could possibly face difficulty.
The city did invest in generators in 2014 and 2015 when we saw extensive periods of load shedding. So we are making use of that where possible, particularly for our large-scale wastewater treatment and pump systems. But at our smaller plants, we do unfortunately not have that generating capacity available. Those sites are fitted with telemetric alert systems where we will be able to respond if we run into supply issues. And our teams are on high alert and we're monitoring the situation very, very carefully.
Limburg today opened an additional spring for use between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. It can deliver 14,000 litres of water per hour. She urges all residents to make use of this and other springs across the city, especially for non-potable use. Stockpiling water is something Cape Townians are familiar with.
If we have to, but yeah, we would like not to. We've collected water before, so we understand how to do it, as long as we all show tolerance and patience for each other through the difficulty. We make things work.
Others are angered by the chain reaction that load shedding is creating.
You've got to have a backup plan. Everybody works with a plan B, I do. So why doesn't government?
Will you be collecting water?
Well, I'm going to be forced to, isn't it?
Actually, I don't actually understand what all this means, but at the moment, it's affecting me in a way. So if I have to, then I have to.
The Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry says the challenges faced by Eskom are a national disaster. It says there have been plenty of explanations, but little concrete action. Mariska Botha, SABC News, Cape Town.
Well, Nkosi and Bayadanki to our colleagues in the Western Cape. Off across the borders now. Zimbabwe says it's still receiving an uninterrupted power supply from Eskom, despite increased power cuts back home. The cash-strapped country is forced to rely on power imports because of low generation capacity from the Kariba hydroelectricity power station, where water levels are low.
I'm happy to report that although the South Africans are facing challenges in the power sector, they've continued to supply us with power. But in our planning, we have taken the position as government that we should diversify our sources of power, even from an importation point of view. So we are safe and sound at the moment, but we're doing everything we can to ensure that we achieve energy security in Zimbabwe. Should there be challenges in that area, I have no doubt that our South African sisters and brothers will communicate that to us, that they are unable. But as of now, we've not received such a communication, and we're continuing to receive power in accordance with the undertakings that we made in our contract with them.
Well, as we conclude this program, here's to hoping that all stakeholders to the energy crisis can come together in this country to find lasting and sustainable solutions. That's where we have to leave it for tonight. From Nana and I, good night.
Join us next week as we'll be looking back into some of the highlights of this year. Until then, it's goodbye from the Economics Unbound team.